It was supposed to be a celebration. Drew Barrymore's show had just crossed a milestone, her 500th episode, and for the occasion, she wanted to bring in someone unpredictable, electric, real. That's how she described Mark Wahlberg when she pitched the idea to her producers. A Boston boy with a story, a swagger, and a short fuse. Perfect contrast to her bubbly pastel optimism. But what no one expected was how fast it would all fall apart. The day of the interview, the energy backstage was off. Mark arrived early, unusually early, and said almost nothing in the green room. His publicist hovered nervously near him, her phone clutched tight in one hand. Rumors were already floating around. Mark had just pulled out of a movie deal, and tabloids had caught him in a shouting match outside a restaurant 2 nights before. His camp blamed paparazzi pressure, but pressure does things to people, especially people with something to prove. Drew, she was her usual self, hugging crew members, sipping iced tea with a smile, floating through the studio like nothing could touch her. But even she had noticed something. The note cards on her desk had been rewritten 3 times. Producers trying to thread a delicate needle between curiosity and confrontation. And sitting just off stage, her head writer muttered under his breath, "This is gonna blow up." The segment started light. Drew welcomed Mark with open arms, both literally and figuratively. "Ladies and gentlemen, he's done it all. Music, movies, miracles. Please welcome Mark Wahlberg." Applause, cheers. A few women screamed. Mark stepped onto the stage with a stiff smile. He gave Drew a side hug, brief, polite, and sat down with a grunt, immediately adjusting the mic on his collar like it was annoying him. Drew leaned in with her signature warmth. "You know, I was just thinking the other day, we've both survived some pretty wild lives. It's kind of amazing we're even still here." Mark smirked. "Yeah, it's a miracle I haven't been canceled yet." Laughter, but it wasn't a joke. For the first few minutes, the energy stayed civil. They talked about Mark's latest fitness app, a new Wahlburgers location opening in Miami, his recent decision to move out of Los Angeles. But then Drew shifted gears. She tilted her head, that telltale sign she was about to get personal. "You've talked a lot about faith lately, but I wonder, do you think you've ever used it to avoid accountability?" Mark blinked. It was like the air changed, subtle, chilling, almost imperceptible unless you were paying attention. He tilted his head slowly, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean by that?" Drew kept her tone soft, almost maternal. "Well, I think sometimes people, especially celebrities, find something spiritual and then reframe their whole story around redemption, right? And I'm not saying you're doing that, but do you ever worry it's become a shield?" There was a flicker of something behind Mark's eyes. Not rage, not yet, but the kind of internal calculation a boxer makes right before the bell rings. He leaned forward. "You want to talk about accountability, Drew?" She smiled, but it wavered. Mark's voice dropped. "You ever apologize to your co-stars from the 90s? Or do we just pretend none of that ever happened?" The audience gave a nervous laugh. Drew's fingers stiffened around her cue cards. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She wasn't expecting that. It spiraled fast from there. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just kept pressing, slowly, methodically, poking at moments from Drew's past she rarely mentioned. Party scenes, rehab stints, old stories buried in soft-focus magazine profiles. She tried to steer the conversation back, tried to reframe, redirect, lighten the mood, but Mark wasn't playing along. "You asked me if I hide behind my faith," he said, "but you hide behind this whole I'm everyone's best friend thing. You smile through every mess. You cry on cue. You've built a brand out of pretending to heal." Silence. You could hear someone in the audience whisper, "Oh my God." Drew's eyes shimmered, not with tears, not yet, but with shock. "I invited you here because I respected your journey," she said, voice tight. Mark didn't blink. "And I came because I thought you'd be real. But this is just performance." He stood up. The audience gasped. Drew sat frozen, one hand lightly touching her necklace. like it might hold her together. Mark looked down at her, jaw clenched. You want to walk out for ratings? You got it. And just like that, he turned and left, the mic wire trailing behind him like a fuse. The audience erupted, half gas, half applause, unsure what to do. Drew sat there alone for a full 10 seconds, the silence stretching like an open wound. Then she finally looked toward the producers off camera and whispered, "Cut the feed." The walkout wasn't just a moment, it was a detonation. By the time Mark Wahlberg's SUV pulled away from the studio lot, clips of his sudden exit were already hitting social media. One blurry backstage phone video showed him ripping off his mic. Another captured Drew Barrymore slumped in her chair, stunned silent. Twitter turned it into a firestorm within minutes. Wahlberg walkout, Nasha Chakra Drew under fire, Chakra accountability, TV. But this wasn't just another celebrity clash. This felt personal, like a grudge that had festered beneath the surface of two very different lives for decades, and had finally exploded. Backstage, Drew was in a trance. Her team hovered like EMTs at an emotional crash site. A producer whispered, "Do you want to cut the episode?" Another offered water. A third tried to lighten the mood. "We can edit around it, add some soft piano, maybe even flip it into a redemption." Drew said nothing. Her hands were trembling. She wasn't just shocked, she was exposed. For the first time in years, Drew Barrymore wasn't in control of the narrative, and the internet could smell it. That night, Mark posted a single story to Instagram. Black screen, one sentence. If they ask for real, give them real. Nothing else. No apology, no backpedal, just gasoline. But something about it rang deeper than usual. Maybe it was the look in his eyes before he left. Maybe it was the fact that, for once, the media wasn't racing to demonize him, because beneath the Boston bravado, he'd said something true, and people knew it. Drew didn't sleep. By 3 a.m., her phone was stacked with texts from agents, publicists, and long-lost co-stars. Some were supportive. Others were not. "You okay? Why didn't you cut to commercial? Can we talk about 97? Don't let this be your Ellen moment." That one hit hard. The next morning, she walked into the studio early, before the crew had even arrived. She stood at center stage, barefoot, looking at the empty audience chairs. Her voice echoed as she whispered to herself, "What did he see in me that I've worked so hard to hide?" Because here's the thing. Drew Barrymore is America's sweetheart, but America has a short memory. They remember the charm, the vulnerability, the teary interviews and floral dresses. But they forget what came before. They forget the Drew who was drinking before she turned 10, who partied in basements with people twice her age, who went to rehab before most kids hit puberty. And most of all, they forget how she clawed her way out, not just into the spotlight, but into control, into producing, directing, hosting. She built a fortress out of kindness, but kindness can become a mask, and Mark ripped it off in front of millions. Later that day, she met with her team. "I want to address it," she said flatly. One assistant gasped. "You mean on air?" "Yes, I want to talk about Mark, about what happened, and about me." A producer gently protested. "Drew, we can just say the segment had technical issues and move on." But she shook her head. "No more edits, no more soft piano, no more pretending." She looked at the team, jaw tight. "If he brought the fire, then I'll bring the truth." When the next episode aired, the usual theme song was gone. No confetti, no smiles, no crowd clapping like seals. Just Drew, alone, sitting in her interview chair. The lights were dim. Her makeup was softer. Her voice was low. "Yesterday, I broke," she began. "Or maybe I cracked in a way that's been building for a long time." She paused. "Mark Wahlberg said something that stung. He accused me of hiding behind a smile, of performing healing instead of living it. And I hated hearing that. But I hated it because part of it was true." She looked off camera, not as a host, not as a brand, but as a woman. "I've worked so hard to move forward, to be someone people can look to for comfort, but in doing that, I may have skipped some steps. I buried a lot of who I was, And in doing that, I've maybe lost sight of who I am. The moment trended instantly, but not in the way people expected. There were no memes, no mockery, no tabloids screaming breakdown. Instead, there were tweets that read, "She's not acting, she's bleeding." She finally took off the smile. She's telling the story we all have. Meanwhile, Mark stayed quiet. No follow-up post, no interviews. Just silence. But something was shifting, because Drew's raw confession had turned the public narrative sideways. What was once a celebrity spat had now become a reckoning. People weren't choosing sides. They were looking inward, asking themselves, what have I buried to survive? But the quiet wouldn't last, because buried truths don't stay buried. And before Drew could find peace in the storm, a figure from her past would step forward. Someone who remembered the pain she forgot. Someone who wasn't ready to forgive. There's a certain silence that only comes after a storm. It isn't peaceful, it's heavy, like the air is waiting for something else to snap. And for Drew Barrymore, that silence became deafening. In the days after her raw confession aired, Drew found herself caught in a strange limbo. Viewers praised her honesty, celebrities posted support, podcasts dissected every sentence like scripture. But the storm hadn't passed. It had only shifted. The attention was back on her, not as a bubbly host, but as a fractured icon. And beneath all the noise, something darker was stirring. It began with an email, then a second, then a voice message from someone Drew hadn't heard from in over a decade. Lana Briggs. Not a household name, but she used to be. Back in the 90s, she was Drew's best friend, co-star, shadow, and cautionary tale. They were inseparable once, teen idols, Hollywood's wild daughters. But then the drugs hit harder, the nights got longer, and one of them got clean, while the other disappeared. Until now. Lana's message was short. Saw your episode, lot of tears. You ready to talk about what you did to me? Drew froze, not because she was guilty, not exactly, but because she knew Lana's pain didn't come from nowhere. They had history, unspoken, unfiltered, and unfinished. Meanwhile, Mark Wahlberg had gone off grid. No interviews, no posts, no statements. But the rumors were building. He'd been approached by Netflix. He was in talks to do a sit-down tell-all. He might even host his own podcast. No more acting. But what caught fire the most was a leaked voicemail, allegedly from Mark, sent to an unnamed friend, maybe a producer, maybe a co-star. She plays innocent, but she's one of the sharpest people I've ever met. Drew's not fake, she's strategic, and she knew what she was doing back then. By back then, everyone assumed he meant the Lana years, and now Lana had gone public. She posted a long, unfiltered Instagram caption, no PR polish, no brand hashtags, just a photo of her and Drew in 1996, arms around each other, eyes glazed. She saved herself, but she left me behind. I was blacklisted, blamed, burned at the stake, and she walked out clean. The comments exploded. Some demanded Drew respond. Others called it a smear campaign. But the damage had begun. This wasn't just a personal feud anymore. It was a trial of Drew's legacy. She couldn't hide behind kindness now. Not when real people were saying she built her image on the ashes of friendships. She booked a closed-door meeting with her team. No press, no publicist spin. Do I talk to her? She asked. A long pause. Then a producer said, if you don't, she'll keep talking. And next time, it won't be on Instagram. It'll be with a documentary crew. That night, Drew reached out. No camera, no script. Just a shaky FaceTime call with Lana Briggs. The screen lit up. The face that appeared looked worn, bitter, but alive. Wow, Lana said. Didn't think you'd actually call. I should have called years ago, Drew whispered. Silence. Then Lana leaned in. You knew what was happening to me, Drew. You saw me spiraling, and when the studio needed a scapegoat, you let it be me. Drew's lip trembled. I was a kid. I was scared. I didn't even know how to save myself, Lana. You knew how to save your career, though. Boom. That line hit like a slap. Drew didn't deny it, because deep down she knew. Survival in Hollywood has a cost, and she paid it with loyalty. Word of their call leaked within hours. No surprise. And just like that, the internet turned again. Not into a mob, but into something worse. Dissection. People posted old clips, old interviews, photos from that era. Zoom-ins, pauses. Did you notice this? Look at her expression here. Suddenly, Drew wasn't just being questioned. She was being analyzed like evidence. Backstage, her staff grew nervous. Do we cancel the rest of the season? Maybe a public apology video? Should we invite Lana on the show? Drew said no to all of it. Instead, she stared at a mirror in her dressing room, hands pressed to the glass. And she said, almost to herself, I've spent my whole life trying to be America's redemption story, but maybe it's time I just be human. She didn't post a Notes app apology. She didn't go live crying. She didn't issue a cease and desist. She did something worse. She did nothing. She let the narrative burn, let the truth drip out, ugly, uneven, unedited. And slowly, the audience shifted. Because while cancel culture loves blood, it respects honesty more. And Drew, for the first time, wasn't defending herself. She was listening. Then came the wild card. Mark. Wahlberg broke his silence. He went on Hot Ones, not to slam Drew, not to cash in, but to drop a line that detonated everything. We're all products of the same machine. I walked off because I was tired of playing perfect. But Drew, she's been performing survival for decades, and that breaks a person. The host blinked. So, you regret walking out? Mark smirked. I regret not asking her off camera first. Boom. Just like that, the fire shifted again. By the end of the week, Drew and Lana met in person. No cameras, no producers, just two women, one hotel rooftop, and a bottle of something strong. They didn't hug, but they didn't yell either. They sat. They remembered. They cried. And when they stood to leave, Lana looked at her and said, You may not be innocent, but at least now, you're real. And for Drew Barrymore, that was enough. There's a moment in every storm when the thunder stops. Not because the skies have cleared, but because there's nothing left to shatter. That's where Drew was now. No more edits. No more applause. No more pretending. Her image, America's bright-eyed, ever-smiling darling, was now bruised, not by scandal, but by truth. And in a world that feeds on spectacle, truth had become the most radical thing she could offer. But the reckoning wasn't done yet, because behind the camera, in the green rooms and inboxes, a silence had been broken. People who had worked with Drew, people who had been hurt, overlooked, or forgotten, started speaking up. Some came with grace, others with receipts. One voice hit the hardest. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't a co-star. It was a name barely anyone knew outside the industry. Maya Chen, a former writer's assistant from Drew's early talk show, Years. She posted a long thread on X. I don't hate Drew, I admired her, but admiring someone doesn't mean staying quiet when the room went cold every time she didn't get her way. There were moments where kindness was used like a sword, where softness wasn't real, where we were told to smile while watching people break behind the scenes. I'm glad she's healing, but I wish she'd let others do the same when we were all trying to survive. That thread hit 10 million views in one day. The media pounced. Barrymore's brand of empathy under fire. Former staff call out toxic positivity. Talk show, queen or silent tyrant. Drew sat in her dressing room, phone face down, trembling. This wasn't a smear campaign. This wasn't a hit piece. This was accountability. And it burned in a way she hadn't expected. Because Maya was right. There had been moments when Drew used her smile as a weapon, when the pain of her past turned into control, when she silenced discomfort to protect her own recovery. She didn't mean to hurt people, but she did. And now she had a choice: defend her legacy or confront it. The next morning, her team came with options. We can do a pre-taped apology. We could call Maya, offer a private conversation. We can shift focus to a charity segment next week. Spin the narrative. Drew shook her head. No more spins. That week, she did something no one expected. She invited Maya to the show, not to debate, not to argue, but to talk, live, unedited, vulnerable. The offer shocked the media. Some called it bold. Others called it a PR stunt. But Drew didn't care. She wasn't protecting a brand anymore. She was protecting something deeper, her humanity. When the episode aired, the room was silent. No music, no laughter. Just two women, one on the rise, one learning to fall gracefully. Drew opened first. "Maya, I failed you, not in some giant, scandalous way, but in the quiet ways that hurt the most. I let my pain become other people's burden. And I want to say, I see it now, and I'm sorry." Maya didn't rush to forgive. Instead, she said something that cut deeper than any headline. Sometimes the softest voice can still be the one that silences a room. But then, she nodded and said, "Thank you for making space for the truth." The moment wasn't viral, it wasn't explosive, it was real, and in a media landscape addicted to outrage, real felt revolutionary. Mark Wahlberg watched the clip from a gym in Boston. He didn't post, he didn't gloat, he just smiled. Not because he won, but because, for once, the industry didn't sweep it under the rug. Weeks passed, the firestorm faded, but something lingered. Drew changed, the show changed, and viewers could feel it. She stopped chasing the perfect moment. She started embracing the messy ones. The smile stayed, but it no longer hid the scars. It honored them. As for Mark, he returned to the show, not for a sit-down, but as a surprise walk-on during a kids' charity segment. The crowd gasped. Drew froze, then laughed, genuinely. "Back again?" she teased. He nodded. "Figured I owed you a better goodbye." They hugged, not for show, not for ratings, just two people, flawed, fiery, real. Because in the end, this wasn't a scandal. It was a mirror, a story not about right versus wrong, but mask versus truth. And when the mask finally fell, what was left wasn't chaos. It was connection. If this story moved you, don't just scroll, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone else is still hiding behind a smile. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to drop the act. Hit that subscribe button and click on bell icon. See you in the next video.